Now, the Prime Minister, surprise, surprise, is overseas again. Why? Because everything's so amazing in Australia. But as he is over there, he has decided to announce a $1 billion defence deal with Germany. He's there because of the NATO talks that will happen in the next couple of weeks, and national security. Let's be honest, I can really ever argue against it. But the military-industrial complex has met no greater friend than Albo, has it? $300 billion for subs and now $1 billion to deal with Germany. Not to mention money that he's also sent overseas, like a couple of $100 million when Australia and Vietnam decided to sign a decarbonisation agreement. And then, of course, there's the latest of money that's being sent to Ukraine, $110 million. Now, I know that you can say this about any money that is spent by government, where you can say, well, this money's being spent here, what about this cause over here? But I'm going to do that tonight, because I received a copy of the magazine that comes out every few months from the people at the Humpty Dumpty Foundation. Now, the Humpty Dumpty Foundation are an excellent group of people who get together and raise money for medical equipment that is needed by kids who go into ICU, little babies in their first hours and days of life. Now, I'm sorry, but if we've got $110 million for decarbonisation in Vietnam and $1 billion for Germany, could somebody please explain to me how the Australian government hasn't just cut a cheque to the Humpty Dumpty Foundation this week for $1 million? Because I'll tell you what happens. In the middle of that magazine that talks about their great work, there is page after page after page that is not a catalogue, but in my view, is a series of failures of our state and federal governments to actually fund what matters. Now, you know, for obvious reasons, why I care so much about this, but all of us can be united about the idea that a kid should have every opportunity to breathe its first breaths, to walk its first steps, to speak its first words. And medical intervention is required for thousands of babies each and every year. But inside that magazine is a list of things that they need money from the public to fund. Here's just a few of them. For $64,000, you can get something for the Perth Children's Hospital. The device will ensure uninterrupted care for children who have seizures, brain injuries, brain bleeding, or brain infection. That's not paid for by the federal or state government. You have to raise money for that in 21st century Australia. What about this one? For a maternity ward in Echuca in Victoria. $47,000. In an emergency situation, this is set up at a critical, this setup is critical in achieving positive outcomes for critically ill babies. Oh, but there's $110 million for decarbonisation in Vietnam. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can get for under $5,000, like all of this stuff, and it goes on and on. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can get for about $10,000 to $15,000 over and over again. But then there is one machine which I am very angry about, that the federal government has not funded the second that this was needed, or that the territory government in the Northern Territory didn't fund the second somebody worked out it was needed. Can I show you this on screen? This is called the Giraffe Omnibed Care Station. And Humpty Dumpty have actually pointed out the exact place that this one needs to be bought for, Alice Springs Hospital. That will cost $67,580. Oh, but there's $1 billion of a new defence agreement in Germany. $110 million for decarbonisation. We paid for the Pacific Games, most recently in the Solomon Islands, and we even paid for their election. Now, this bed will be used to provide care for the smallest and sickest newborn babies and will reduce transfers to the intensive care unit, as the babies can be safely cared for and isolated if required due to infection. Now, I feel what you feel. The governments of this country take more tax than ever before. And I know that when you turn around and say $1 was spent on this, it could be spent somewhere else, better. But this is an example of how that dollar can be spent somewhere else. Currently, the charity sector that is doing the heavy lifting for this country needs way more money. And there's not a lot of that money that comes from corporates, and there's too much reliance upon people like you to dig into your pockets, no matter how shallow or how deep that they are. And I know that tonight, because I've mentioned some of these things, hopefully someone watching who's got an access to a fair amount of cash might be able to go onto this website right now and go to humpty.org.au and maybe spring up for the $67,000 that they need for something that'll save a kid's life in Alice Springs. Maybe you've got $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 for all those other things. Maybe you got $47,000 for the infant warmer that's needed in Echuca, or maybe you got $64,000 for what should be in the Perth Hospital right now. But it is a disgrace. It is a national disgrace that charity has to do the work that government is always there to turn up and cut the ribbon for. It is a disgrace that in 21st century Australia, technology that keeps babies alive is being donated because the state doesn't pay for it. Now, I know that there are cost of living crises, and we'll get to those a little later in the show. If you can help, do help. If you can get onto these websites, do and donate what you can. But fair income, unbelievable stuff. And the balls of these politicians to say, I'm here to help you, when the reality of their lack of help is that you have to ask people for money for stuff that keeps babies alive in the Northern Territory. Our priorities, they are wrong.